Hey everybody, this is Nick from Android Headlines. Today we're going to be looking at the OnePlus 2, specifically the hardware elements, which, unlike the software, are in their final form. So this week I took the long trip from Florida and flew out to San Francisco for an event that OnePlus was having for the OnePlus 2. Now, it was in a pretty nondescript building at first, but once OnePlus invited us in, we understood exactly why they held it here. We had a full 5 hours with the OnePlus 2 and were able to put it fully through its paces. That includes running benchmarks, taking videos, checking out the hardware, pretty much everything you could want in a hands-on experience with the phone. So it has the Snapdragon 810. There are two different versions of the phone. So you have a 64 gig version, which has 4 gigs of RAM, and a 16 gig version with 3 gigs of RAM. Neither of these have SD card support, and the 16 gig version is not going to be available at launch. It won't be available for another couple of months. The price difference between the two is about $50, so at $389 it's probably worth it to just get the 64 gig version. On the back, you're going to find a 13 megapixel camera. On the front is a 5 megapixel camera. It's a 1080p 5.5 inch screen, and it runs Oxygen OS 2.0, which is OnePlus's own little version of Android 5.1 Lollipop. Now, the Snapdragon 810 has had quite a bit of controversy over the past couple of months. If you've been following up on what's going on with that processor, basically it's been getting really hot. In some phones it overheats quite a bit, and in some phones, we won't mention names, it gets so hot you actually can't touch the phone if you use it too much. So, with that being said, there was a lot of concern with OnePlus using this processor in their newest phone. Now, speaking with Carl Pei, who's the co-founder of OnePlus, I learned that OnePlus has done a number of things to help alleviate the problems that people have seen with the Snapdragon 810. That includes things like dropping the frequency down from 2.6 GHz down to 1.8 GHz, coming up with a scheduler that keeps adjacent cores from being used unless needed. It uses as few cores as necessary. And they also did things like moving components around that generate heat and including some more passive cooling elements than maybe some other manufacturers have. So if you're concerned about the frequency differences between the 2.6 and the 1.8 GHz version, you probably shouldn't be all that worried, and here's why. The ones that are running at 2.6 tend to downclock all the way down to 900 MHz after just a few minutes usage because they get so hot. It seems like OnePlus' decision to run this at 1.8 GHz instead of the full 2.6 has actually worked in their favor, because after running benchmarks for about a half an hour, I never found that the phone got hot. It got a little warm, but it wasn't any warmer than any other phone would get when you're downloading a lot of data or just using the phone a lot in general. Performance-wise, when we're looking at benchmarks, the scores are all the same or even higher than a lot of the other Snapdragon 810 phones. And again, I think this is because the 1.8 GHz speed keeps it from having the downclock as much as the other phones do. Now, looking at the actual hardware, OnePlus has put a USB Type-C port on the bottom here. Now, USB Type-C is a faster, reversible port, so no more flipping up and down 30 different times until you can finally plug it into your phone, a common annoyance with USB in general. On the right side of the phone, you're going to have the volume rocker and the power button, which is pretty common of a lot of Chinese devices. And this is done because on the left side of the phone, you have a brand new priority slider. Now, this priority slider works with the priority modes in Android Lollipop, which are none, priority, and all notifications. If you've ever used Lollipop, you'll note that this is probably a really awesome little switch. Switching it to the top is going to give you no notifications at all. Switching it in the middle is going to only give you priority notifications, and this is something that is set in the software. And switching it to the bottom will give you all notifications as usual. On the back of the phone, we have the rather weird-looking camera placement, but if you think about it, this is actually about 1 finger length from the top. On the OnePlus 1, the camera sensor was at the very top of the phone, and sometimes when you're taking pictures, your finger gets in the way because, well, that's where you usually hold the phone. So although it's not the prettiest way to put a camera sensor on here, it is actually a pretty awesome placement for when you're taking pictures and video. The phone itself is a little thicker, and OnePlus told me that's because the camera sensor is larger, a bigger battery, as well as all the different cooling elements for the Snapdragon 810. Now, when I say thicker, I'm not really talking it's a huge brick of a phone. It's just a little bit thicker than the OnePlus 1. So if you've held that, it's not really much different at all in the hand. You probably won't notice it unless you're holding them both at the same time. Now, looking at the camera sensor, Carl Pei told me that it's using an Omnivision sensor, which is going to be an exclusive sensor to the OnePlus 2, likely for the rest of the year. Instead of going with the 16 megapixel sensor like a lot of other manufacturers have been doing in this year's flagship models, OnePlus decided that larger pixels are more important than actual resolution. So with larger pixels, you're talking more light coming into the sensor, better low light shots, you're even talking better dynamic range too. So if you check out our camera comparison video, you'll understand exactly what the differences are between these two sensors. The back is fully and very easily removable. It works just like the backs on some of the Samsung phones out there. There's also 5 different style swap covers. The phone is going to ship with Sandstone Black, which was the trademark look of last year's OnePlus One. You're also going to be able to buy Bamboo, Rosewood, Black Apricot, and Kevlar backs. Now all of these backs are really high quality materials. They fit on there really well, and they snap on and off really easily. So if you want to change them out for one day, keep one for the next day, it's really super simple to do. On the front of the phone, you're going to have a really interesting looking home button. Now this isn't your normal home button. It's actually not a physical button at all. It's a capacitive button, like the two on either side of the screen. So when you touch it, it's a little recessed. It's basically got a raised section around the home button to fit your finger in for the fingerprint scanner. Now the fingerprint reader is super fast, it's super accurate. In my time of using it, I never once had it mess up. Now, obviously, if I have a little longer with it, I might find a couple of scenarios where it doesn't read it exactly right. But you can set up more than one fingerprint if you want. When you scan the fingerprint, it asks you to scan it in different ways, so you can place your fingerprint on there basically in any way possible. When you're unlocking the phone, you can either just put your finger on the fingerprint reader and it will wake the screen up and unlock the phone, or if you prefer to look at your lock screen first and then use the fingerprint reader to unlock it, you can do that too. Oddly enough, there's no NFC in this phone, so the fingerprint reader will pretty much only work for unlocking the phone. That's a pretty questionable move by OnePlus, but it is what it is, and it's not likely going to be added by the time the phone launches. The 1080p display was a concern for some, but in general this keeps the performance really high, it keeps the processor from having to struggle too much, and it keeps the panel probably more high quality than it would have at this price range if OnePlus went with a Quad HD display. Overall, this is some pretty beautiful hardware. The build quality is absolutely phenomenal. It's got a really nice metal trim around it. It has a really good weight to it. The phone feels really, really solid, and in general, it's a pretty significantly improved build quality over last year's OnePlus One. That's going to be it for today. If you want to check out more of our OnePlus videos, we've got a full software overview. We've got a camera comparison between the OnePlus One and the OnePlus 2. And we've even got a nifty little drop test where OnePlus showed us an OtterBox case that's going to be coming out for the launch of the phone. Thanks for watching. Until next time.